Hello, people watching the video. I am sorry the lecture did not start recording. The good thing is we did not get very deep into the class. So we are just getting into talking about Substance Painter. We're talking about procedurals and how useful they are. As I was saying, procedurals are very useful because they are basically like a combination of code made to make an artist's life a little bit easier. So it's not a thing where you just apply it and just be like, hey, it's done, it's perfect. It's meant to have a bunch of switches that you guys can personalize to make the effect look the way you want it to. And just so you know, when you're looking for jobs out there in 10 months when you graduate Full Sail, do not ever show on your portfolio textures that are just smart materials that you've taken from Substance and applied to your models. We're always going to want to build on top of that. And I'm going to tell you this because every artist out there worth his salt that's going to be interviewing you knows what the Substance library materials looks like. And they'll be able to point out on your portfolio, you're just putting smart materials on this. So we're going to start with those smart masks. Then we're going to use some procedural effects on top of that called like fills. And then we're going to start doing some actual brush work. That's going to be kind of our workflow for today. And then we're going to kind of blend some things together. You'll see it will be great fun. So brushes, again, we're mostly going to be painting inside the mask. There are a couple of brushes that I tend to love, and I'll point them out because why not? I really recommend Dirt 2, Scratches 2, and it used to be called Artistic 2, but now I think it's like Artistic. I don't remember. We'll use it. It's like the second brush. It's like Artistic Soft or something. Now, one of the other things that I really first blew my mind when I started using Substance Painter is the ability that you have the ability to work with channels at the same time. So you guys have used a bump map, right? And you've made base color diffuse maps, right? Now, what happens when you have to make a bump map and a color map for the same object? You make your color map, you make it black and white, you kind of adjust the levels, right? And then you save it out. What happens when your art director comes by and he says, cool, I want you to change this area so it's a little bit more smudgy? Believe me, art directors do that. That's what they do. Now you have to go and change your color map, which means you have to change your height map. And what if you had a spec map? Now you got to change that. What if you had a roughness map? Now you got to change that. And again, I worked at EA when this was our workflow. This is just what we had to do. But because we're in Substance Painter, you can change all of those at the same time. One brush stroke, 4 different textures are changed. And then we also have cool maps like Emissive. Have you guys worked with Emissive at all? Emissive is glow. I think it's incandescence in Maya. Substance Painter, it's called Emissive. In Unreal, it's called Emissive, and in Unity, it's called Emissive. All the game stuff can use the same language. Computer animation stuff does whatever they want. Yeah, so it's really cool. When I first learned about it in Substance Painter, we were working on like doing a tutorial with like a lava creature. And so we had like hard rocky bits of like the cooled lava, and then he had like the warm like cracks of yellow and red, orange and red, and those were emissive. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's really all I have to say about it. All right. I think we're ready for some Maya. You guys ready for Maya? I'm going to stop walking around, sit down here. Don't worry, we won't be in Maya for long. Whew. It's really hard to use the masks and the computer glasses at the same time. I bet you understand, and you, and you. Okay. So the things that we're going to work with today, we're going to work with a cutting board, and we're going to work with this candle holder here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the bread in and the cheese, just so I know where it's at. Tell me that I was smart enough to already assign the materials to these things. I was. That makes me very happy. So grab everything. Oh, before I do this, you guys know that when you export to Substance Painter, your texture sets are going to be based on your material selection. So if you have a material, like for example, the knife generally has two materials, right? So that'll come in as two separate textures. I've actually set mine to not work like that. It's hot. And UVs. Let's talk about UVs actually. So I don't know if you guys have looked at many of the UVs in your scene. A lot of the UVs are overlapping on a lot of these objects. But they taught you UVs before this class, right? What did they teach you about overlapping UVs? What'd you say? Okay. Don't do it. Yes. Do you know what a collage UV is? Okay. And do you know what repeatable UVs are? All right. So everybody knows this. So I'm going to really quickly just go over it. Repeatable UVs are what we use for tiled textures. When you're using repeatable UVs, UVs stacking over top of each other do not matter. When your UVs on repeatable UVs go outside the 0 to 1, it does not matter. When you're doing a collage UV, which by the way is what you export from Substance Painter, it's always a collage UV, you cannot stack anything and you cannot go outside the 0 to 1. Because outside the 0 to 1, things repeat, and when things are stacked, they repeat. That gets really complicated when you're painting directly on the object. So you have two things on top of it. The UVs are right here saying the same thing, but you have two different models that you can paint individually in Painter. Painter doesn't know what to do because it's like, you're telling me to paint here, but not here, but those are the same space on the texture. So if you're going to paint in Substance Painter, you have to be using collage UVs. So a lot of these objects, and Frank will be honest with you, Frank UV'd the scene. A lot of these objects are set for repeatable textures because before I started teaching Substance, everything in this class was repeatable textures. We started teaching Substance Painter, now things need collage UVs. I have re-UV'd several of the things so that they have collage UVs. Just be aware, anything you bring into Substance Painter, you're probably going to have to set the UVs for, except the bread. The bread is special. You guys know that you can apply the reference image we give you for the bread to the texture, right? Okay, that's why it's special. And for some reason, this table is just messed up. I've had so many problems trying to get this to go into Substance Painter. I've just decided it's not worth dealing with anymore. But I did have to re-UV the candle holder. And if you want to do the knife, you have to re-UV that as well. Get that cookie that I brought in. Go to File, Export Selection. Scene FBX. Now, my interface is a little bit different than yours. This will be on the right-hand side of the file save window. Two things, make sure to turn off animation. Another thing I like to show you guys is to go into your advanced option, FBX file format settings, and use the 2014-2015 version. And this is because the newer versions have a bug in it where if you export an FBX, you can't re-import it into Maya. It doesn't stop you from really doing this assignment or stop you from bringing anything into Unreal or Unity or anything like that. It does stop you from being able to bring a model back into Maya, which is not a big deal. I just want you guys to know about that. So I'm going to use this old version. And one last thing. I think I've already fixed this on all of these models. But you guys know how you can press the 3 key on a model and it smooths it, which is really useful when your entire workflow is in Maya. But if you export an object from Maya, that 3 key smoothing, it ignores that it existed. You go back to the 1 mode. So if you're going to export something and it has that smoothing, just put it back on the 1 and go up here to Mesh, and go to smooth and just smooth it once or twice until it looks like it should. Which is why I think you guys will notice my bread has a lot more faces. I don't think anything else needed that, but the bread definitely did. Okay, that should be it for Maya. Sadly, my Substance launcher is not working. And if I go to the guys at Allegorithmic and ask to get some help fixing it, they're like, we don't support that anymore. You have to download the Creative Cloud version. So we are not upgrading to 7.2.2. We are doing 7, I think it's 2.1, or no, it's 7.1.1. We're still on 7.1.1. And that is just because I have not updated to the newest version. I have watched a bunch of tutorials on it, and I do know that it is pretty distinctly different. So hopefully we will soon be transitioning to that. It does have a new material. The new material is pretty good. It actually allows you to do antroscopy brushed metal in Substance Painter, which is cool. There's other things like coat and sheen that it does. And it's called, what is it? ASM, Adobe Standard Material. Pretty good. Okay, so new scene. Ooh, you guys don't look at that. Now you can look. Where's my project folder? There it is. And the Scene FBX folder. This. All right, here's all of our objects. Cool. I didn't miss anything. Whew. I'm sorry if I'm a little sluggish, guys. I didn't realize how much harder this lecture is to give with a mask on in the middle of August. Because for those of you who are doing this online and you don't know how hot it is in Florida, it's really hot in Florida right now. And the mask on is just making it worse. but I understand we're in a pandemic and we all got to cope. Okay, so we've got our scene. Got a couple of things that we got to do before we're ready to jump in and start texturing. We have to bring in our IBL. We have to bake our texture sets. That might be it. So let's start by, actually, first let's bring in our textures that we need. You go over here to this little box and click on that, or you can go to File, Import Resources, same thing. We're going to bring in some textures that I prepared. So source images. First, let's bring in our dome light. That's not it. That's it. And then I'll bring in the bread just in case. And the bread bump. And the cutting board texture. And what the heck, we'll do the AAA logo. Okay. So most of these are going to be alphas or textures. So the logo is an alpha. The bread is a texture. Bread repeating texture, texture. I don't know why I brought in the cheese. I don't even think I exported the cheese. Cookie, this is a base material. That's weird. We'll talk about that. Alpha, cutting board is a texture. And then the dome light is an environment. So what is the difference between an alpha and a texture, guys? Anybody tell me? A texture seems pretty simple, right? It's a repeating texture that we're going to use for a texture. But an alpha is something that we're going to use as a stencil. So it's going to be a black and white image. It's going to be fairly hard line, something like the AAA logo or the SAL logo or your own logo. And let's save this to the current project. You can save it to current session. That means that the next time you close Substance Painter, you'll have to re-import everything. You can save it to the project, which makes your file size a bit bigger, or you can save it to the shelf, and it will be saved to Maya forever. I'm going to save it to the project. Sorry, save to Substance forever. And while we're at it, let's save our scene. Quit trying to show the students my contract work, computer. We're not supposed to know about that. Where? You guys may notice that I have a bit of an enhanced project folder here. I have folders for Substance. I have folders for FBXs that I export. And I have folders, I think, for ZBrush. But basically, at some point, I got tired of having like all those different project folders for every SAL project folder. So I made a master project folder. And then inside the scenes folder, there's a folder for project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, project 5, project 6, project 7. And then, I have everything I need in the source images folder. Basically, I took like an hour and I was like, all right, everything in one place. Okay. Let's hook up our dome. So right now, this is what our dome looks like. This doesn't really do a good job replicating our lighting. And honestly, if you guys are going to work with any of these, unless you're doing like a building or something that's going to be in an environment very similar to what we're looking at here, I really recommend the Tacoma. The Tacoma is studio lighting. This is kind of what we would want if we were doing project 3 and we had to put a dome on. However, we have the dome that actually matches our lighting because we brought it in. And it should be, where is it? Oh, Zen Garden. So you guys may recognize this as the parking lot behind 4B. Or maybe not. You guys haven't spent much time around 4B, have you? You went there what? Okay. Normally, our students spend a lot of time in 4B because that's where all the labs are. All right. So one thing that I have problems with this is I find that it's not very bright for some reason. So I do like to just raise the exposure a little bit so that the materials aren't so dark. I don't know why this particular dome does that. So sometimes I actually import one of the reference domes Tony gives you. So. I don't know if you guys still get this image. Not that one. Yeah, this one. Do you guys still get this one? Okay, we won't use that one then. We'll stick with the one here. For some reason, this one needs like a lot of extra exposure because it's like really dark. Yeah, like there. Okay. This one doesn't help that our materials are super flat. Whatever. We're going to stop worrying about that. Let's bake our textures. So click on the one over here. Go to bake mesh maps. No material IDs, no normal maps. Let's go to ambient occlusion. Only same mesh. Curvature, only same mesh. And we're only going to bake out candle holder, yes. Cheese, no. Knife, no. So this should be fine. Let's go ahead and bake all these textures. Now, we skipped normal map. Does anybody know why you would use normal map? Why would you bake a normal map? What? For the color? Not really. World space normal kind of gives you color, but that has more to do with how the procedurals work. Sorry, I'm taking off my mask because I'm drinking water. What?
For depth.
What do you mean by depth? You're kind of on the right train of thought.
Illusion depth, right?
Correct. So it's the same thing as a bump map. But we used to teach this in modeling, but we started leaning more on Substance Painter in the modeling classes. Have you guys used ZBrush at all? I got one nod and a lot of no's. So in ZBrush, you make these really, really high geometry models. They're sculpts. And they have a lot of detail, like 4 million polygons worth of detail, right? That thing would never run in Maya. So what we typically do is we have a high resolution mesh and a low resolution mesh. And that low resolution mesh, you're going to bake all of that high poly information into a normal map. You can do that in Substance Painter in that normal map area. We don't have any ZBrush models for our stuff here. They wouldn't actually be very helpful because it would be ridiculous to sculpt a cutting board. It would be a pointless amount of geometry. But for anything organic, ZBrush is where it's at. Human characters, rocks, even some foliage. And then I recently, last year, I sculpted a whole mountain in ZBrush for an environment. It was fun. And then, of course, I baked that into a texture or in Substance Painter. Okay. So let's get going. Now, the default painting layers are, of course, these blank layers that you can just paint on. But I prefer doing a fill layer. And you'll see me work like this all the time. The problem is when you do a fill layer, so you apply a color, you can't change it, right? I can't paint anything. But that is where the mask comes in. Change it to a black mask, paint in the mask. Let's get a better brush. That's it. Oh, it's just called artistic brushing. Oh, I hate this. It'd be fine if the default was just 100%, but it's always like 0. I like artistic hard. Artistic hard's good too. So all these are good. These right here. You just gotta turn up the minimum size every time. But the beauty of this is if I want to change this, it's as simple as going to this, and there we go. If I used one of these layers, and let's say I painted my color in, actually sort of confused how to do this because I never use non-painting layers. Let's say I do this. Now I want to change my color. I change it to like green. It didn't change. But if I go over here and I'm like, you know what? Green. Or I could change my roughness. I can make it super smooth. Super not smooth. It's pretty easy to change. Or I could do what I'm actually going to do. Go over to my project, grab my cutting board texture. Boom. Let's delete our mask because I'm not actually going to use that. The text is so small when I'm not on my big monitor, guys. There we go. Oh, roughness was ridiculous. There we go. Still not loving this exposure. It's weird. It's weird. and too dark. No, no. I just want to see this. Yeah, 0.2 is way too much exposure. That's way too dark. You know what? I'm making an executive decision here, guys. We're going with the Tacoma. Because the other one is just weird. See, look how much more natural this looks, except for the roughness. There we go. All right, so we've got our cutting board texture. Let's define our material real quick. I'm actually going to get rid of the normal channel because we're not going to paint in it. We will still get a normal map. We can make it metallic if we wanted to. There's not really any reason to do that, but we could do that. Height, roughness. I kind of put roughness. 0.2 is not bad. Let's leave it at 0.3 for now. And this is going to be our base layer. So right now, we're effectively at the same point we were when we kind of started in Maya, because we could have just put this texture in Maya. Actually, I'm going to tile this real quick. So it looks, what are my UVs for this? Yeah, I thought it looked a little weird. There we go. Apparently, I did not make this texture seamless. Oops. All right. So what I want to talk to you guys about is, what do we do now? So we didn't just bring this into Substance so we could put our color map on it and call it a day. Remember what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture? Wear and tear. So what are we going to do to make this cutting board look more realistic? Scratches or cuts? Cuts. It's a cutting board. Yeah. That's the sarcasm. I'm not trying to be mean. So yes, we'll put some cuts in it. That's a very good one. What else? What else would happen to a cutting board that we've had in our house for 2 years? Like discoloration. That's a good idea. What discolored it? But what caused the discoloration? Oh, water wouldn't do it so much, but something with color in it. What do you cut on your cutting board that has color? Meat. It is blood or meat juice, however you want to look at it. Tomatoes, cherries. Anybody cut cherries on their cutting board? I did recently. I was trying to get the seeds out. And I'll tell you, cherries stain your cutting board very quickly. So we're going to want something red, right? Now, all of this that we're looking up, you should look up reference for. I already have reference images for this, and I've done this lecture so many times, I know what it looks like. But look up reference for used cutting boards. Cutting boards that have scratches, cutting boards that have these stains you're looking for. It is out there. And honestly, really, if you have a cutting board at home, just take a picture of it. And I assume most of you do. Yeah?
Is it already or taking reference? So that's only going to be for those scratches. Or if it's not like the same material.
So currently we're not grading your reference for this assignment. Or for, we are grading your reference for this assignment. We're not grading your reference for doing your substance textures. I'm encouraging you to get it because you should, and that's going to help you have more information so you can do a better texture. But currently we're not requiring you to submit that. I do recommend that, yes, you have the same sort of material, because let's just think about cutting boards. There are wood cutting boards and there are plastic cutting boards. Is a plastic cutting board going to work the same way a wood cutting board is when meat juice stains it, or cherry juices or tomatoes? No. Another thing is, we actually don't allow you to use plastic cutting boards because of subsurface scattering. In order to do them correctly, you would have to do subsurface scattering, and we don't have time to teach that to you. Sadly. Subsurface scattering is really complicated. Anyway, so what do we got? We got cuts and we got some stains. Anything else? Wear and tear on the corners. Okay, that's good. Sometimes people get creative in here, so I wanted to offer you guys the opportunity. Okay, those are good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some empty fill layers for that list. So we're going to do some cuts. Edge wear. You can use spaces, by the way. I don't in 3D anymore. I'm so used to not being allowed to. And then stains. Okay. So let's start with our cuts. Now, there are a couple of ways you can do this. You guys can go and find a lighter wood grain image to put in there. But typically what I like to do is I will just go in here. I'll take my cutting board. I'll press C, so we're in base color mode. And I will color sample my reference. And then I'll just get it so it's like a little bit lighter of a color than the reference. That'll encompass the whole thing. Now, let's talk about these other channels here. So, height should probably be lower than we had before, right? We can change that, but right now we're going to leave it on. Let's go -1.5. That'll be a good starting place. We can always change it. Roughness. Before we had it at 0.3, where should our roughness be on this layer? What do you think? Past what? You can't go past 1. 0 to 1. Past 0.5 is good. We'll just put it, yeah, right there around like almost 0.6. Metallic, what should that be? Should be off is what it should be. It's not metal. Okay, so that's sort of the workflow we're going to go with right there, or the material we're going to go with there. Then I'm going to add the black mask. Let's go back to full material mode. Okay, so here's how I like to do this. The first thing I will do with my mask is I will go over here to Smart Masks, and I'll examine what we have available. You can actually download some of these from Substance Source if you want more, if you can find some good ones. and see if there's one that kind of fits what I'm trying to do. I'm very aware that what we're trying to do right now, we don't have a good one for. But just for fun, let's throw something on here. There we go. That actually is not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. It's kind of fun. And we could go in here and probably play with the settings. We may have to adjust our color. That looks like paint now. Anyway, I'm not going to use that one. What I am going to do is I'm going to add a fill. That's the second step I like to do. Add fill. And so there is a fill that I like to use. You can go to grunges or procedurals for fills. So we're doing cuts. So there's a couple that I like to use here. Scratches generator rough. And so what a fill is, it's basically a blank spot to put one of these images in. So I'm going to go ahead and add this one in. The Scratches generator is pretty good. So here, I want those to be smaller. Let's increase the tiling a bit. Oh, too far. So what this is, it's a nice procedural effect. We can go down here. There's a bunch of switches that we can pull. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of spot. What double scratch? I like that. Where's the spot? Ah, scratch spot intensity. Get rid of that. I hate that one. And then I actually like to go lower on the width. Increase the length. Can that go up to 2? It cannot. Cool. I might lower this to 1.5. There we go. And offset it. Want our scratches kind of more in the middle, don't we? So there we go. That's a nice procedural effect, right? It's a good place to start. We could, I don't know if we'd want to, but we could layer another one. On top. And this time I went with just the scratches generator, not the rough one. Increase this one to 2. And you'll notice this has a lot less options, which is why I don't like it as much. And then what we would do is we would change this to linear dodge add or lighten max. Shane seems to like lighten max, so I've been listening to him lately. And is it better? Is it better? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. I'm going to say no. So I'm going to delete it. There we go. And then lastly, I always add a paint. Again, I can't see anything with this small screen and these fogged up glasses. So a paint is just a layer that allows you to paint in it. It's pretty simple. But this is a black and white mask, so we can only paint in black and white. So that means if we go over to our project or our brushes, I can grab, where is it? Dirt 2, the best brush. And I'll give myself some stroke opacity. And I can kind of paint some areas out. You know, maybe I have a little bit too much outside the center. And then, you guys didn't think I was actually going to not manually paint the scratches in. That's the fun part. Scratches 2. Increase the flow because for some reason minimum flow is 0. We want to have some jitter. Flow jitter, sure. Size jitter, not a lot. Position jitter, yeah. Angle jitter, almost none. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've checked my cutting board at home. I tend to cut in very similar angles. Except for when I change my handing, I'm trying to cut this, or change my direction, I'm trying to cut this way for some reason. But that does happen. Because the instructions on the blue apron say cut lengthwise and then cut crosswise. So here, we're just going to go ahead, make sure we're painting white. Larger, please. We're just going to paint some cuts in. Simple as that. And then we'll do some crosswise cuts. Now, one cool thing is if you press C, you can check your channels. There's our color. There's our height, which is honestly never useful. I don't know why. Roughness, metallic. There's our normal map. And here's our mask. There's one slight problem. Do you guys see? We cut in the groove. I don't know about you though. If you have that groove on the outside of your cutting board, it's really hard to get the knife down in there. So those wouldn't be there. We could manually erase those out. We could. I don't want to. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add another fill. Sorry. Actually, it's not a fill. It is a smart mask. Smart material or smart, yeah, smart mask. And there's one here. Occlusion. Let's put this one on top. On top. Oh no, right the first time. And you'll see, okay. Is that what I want? No, that's the opposite of what I want. So I'm going to invert it. Go to M. This is not what we wanted. Let's change this to multiply. And what it does is it makes everything that was black in the mask black. That top layer, everything that's black is going to be black. So if we go to our mask, that means that we've just told it, hey, everything that's in that groove, I want it to be black. Which means that our mask looks like this. Now, a couple of things before we move on. Let's go back and let's look at our actual layer. Not the mask, come on. It's acting weird. I should save. Hello? Okay, this is weird. No, I don't want to use the new version. I do want to soon, but not today. Okay, it was acting weird. So I want to go back and really examine what I have here. I think the height is probably too much. No, sorry. 0.05. That's too little. There we go. 0.1 is fine. I'm actually going to lower the opacity on the color because I think the color is a little bit too much. There we go. And roughness. I actually think our base layer has too much roughness now. Has too little roughness. There we go. Too bossy. Whew. Okay, so next up, let's get that edge wear in here. And I actually want the same color for the most part. Okay. So we know we're going to want this at 0.1. And we'll leave our roughness at 0.6, and we'll turn off our metal. Honestly, we could have done these in the same layer. I'm just kind of splitting it up because these are different effects that we're doing. I could have just done all these masks in here. It would have made the mask more complicated, but we'll be fine. So the first thing I'm going to do, go down into Smart Masks. And there are actually some really good ones for this. We're going to go no, not edge is strong. Not edge is stone cracks. Edge damage. Maybe not. Edge dirty, edge rust, edge stone, edge blur, edge scratch. Let's try that. Oh, that is intense. Nope, changed my mind. We're going back to edge damages. Now that is too much edge wear. We got to change this light. That light is like blowing us out. And I use this one often enough. I know that you can go down here into the individual textures and play with it. I think if we increase the balance on the second one, I'll actually remove some of those. Which we're not even getting it around the edges we want now. This is just annoying me. There we go. Better. It's happening around the groove. I don't want that. All right. You know what? We randomly picked one earlier that was kind of cool. Let's go with that. I like that one. I'm not as familiar with it. What the? Hey, there we go. That's kind of what I wanted. Just lower the curvature. All right, now we got a little bit of subtle edges. That's all I really wanted, guys. And I'm going to skip the fill and go straight to the paint. Grab a good old Dirt 2. Okay. May increase this again. Nope, not there. Back to my paint layer. Paint it out where I don't want it. Okay, then we got to ask ourselves, was this worth our time? Turn the layer on and off. I think so. I think it's pretty noticeable. All right. Let's do our stains. I've got a little trick for you guys here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this color map again. Actually, let's delete that. I'm going to use my layer here, my base. I'm just going to duplicate it. And make that my stains. And I'm going to change this blending mode to multiply. And I'm going to decrease the roughness 0.2. Which realistically, I should increase my specularity. I can't really do that. I could if I was actually in the newest version. So there we go. Got more kind of smoothness there. More reflectivity. No metal. And then we add our black mask. So just like before, we're going to do the same exact workflow. Going to think about a smart mask. The only one I like is this one. And even then, only kind of. Sometimes I don't even bother with it. It's the annoying thing about, or the weird thing about teaching the same lecture every week. I spend a lot of time thinking about this cutting board collectively. So, and the thing about the smart mask is you can't change the offset or change the scale. So if I don't like where these details are positionally, I can't just move them. Which is why I'm of two minds about this one. Because I really want it to be more in the center. So if I use this, I'm going to have to go and I'm going to paint out the corners, which is where most of the detail is. So I'm always like, is it even worth it? I think today I decided it is worth it. I don't know what this is doing. All right. So today we'll stick with it. Oh, I'm gonna put my stains actually below my scratches. Interesting. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the opacity on this layer a little bit. That's better. And then we're going to add our fill. So there are a ton of fills, by the way, guys, that I could add. And this is kind of why I sometimes decide to not even use that, because some of these, I can just use these. It would, well, not that one. But some of these, I could just use these instead. Like if I wanted something kind of organic and all over the place, Have to adjust the balance because come on. And I have more control over the offset. Yeah, that one's terrible though. What I actually want to do is I want to use this guy. And let's go ahead. Where are they? Let's turn on our cheese and our bread, just so we know that the details we're putting in here aren't going to be completely covered up. Because what's the point of putting all that time into getting them there? We're not going to see them. There. So there we go. That's kind of fun. And then I'll just add a paint. There we go. Pretty good start. Now for the opposite. Because the center is going to be pretty properly stained. Oh, I almost forgot. Ew. You don't need any of this nonsense back here. Anyway, I think that looks pretty good, guys. Go ahead and solo it again. Now, what do you think? I think this will look pretty good in our little scene. And somebody will believe that that is a cutting board. That we didn't just buy it at the store and unwrap, have our picnic done. With a knife and cheese that we clearly haven't cut at all. Okay. So We have a bit of time before break, which is at 3, right? We're going to do the metal candle when we get back. So, we could either take break 20 minutes early, or I can show you guys how to texture the bread for a little bit. What do you think? You want to see the bread? I don't want to exclude you guys who are here virtually, by the way. You've just been a little quiet. Are you guys there?
I'm all good.
You guys want to see the bread? Now we had one person speak up. Okay. So I've got 1 or 2 tricks for the bread. The bread is a little difficult because of the way we've set up the UVs for you. And we did that because to texture a whole loaf of bread realistically is kind of a massive pain in the butt. So we gave you a texture that you can just use. And it's a little weird because when you assign it in Substance Painter, it looks weird. So we'll just do a fill for the base. And like before, I'm going to get rid of my normal map. And I'm also going to put this black and white in for the height, which sucks. Like, it looks terrible. But if I go over here, I can change this to height. I can actually change the influence this is going to have. So we can change it down to like 20%. Oh, it's also super glossy. It should be way less glossy. Red is pretty porous, so I'm going to put this up to like 0.7. So we kind of have the bump for the bread. We don't have a lot of control over the way that's being read in here. It's a little annoying. We will have control over it when we put it into Maya, because we can use that node to control the value. But I don't like how the white parts are kind of sticking out. Can actually do more time adjusting that in Photoshop. It looks stale. It does look a little old. Looks like bread we probably shouldn't be eating. Let's go ahead and add our cutting board back in so we can get an idea of where our camera would be. Our camera would be here though. So keep in mind, we're not going to see the bread like this. We're going to be seeing the bread like this. So that's pretty good. Now, what I like to do with the bread, there's one thing I like to do with the bread. Because with a loaf of bread, it would be pretty fresh. Like, it's a whole loaf of bread. It hasn't been sitting in our house for days. And if it is, we probably kept it in the bag because we specifically bought it for this picnic. But, you know, bread is organic, so there's going to be things that are going to happen to it just anyway. So what I like to do, this is kind of fun. So this is not my base, this is my crust. Let's go back to color. And I'm going to do a new one. And I've taken this texture here, and this is a little weird. It's a texture of bread without crust on it. So it's like a slice of bread that I made tileable. repeat it twice, get the camera off it. And so that's what bread would look like if you cut all the crust off of it. Maybe 2.5. Yeah, there we go. And I have a bump map too. Which is not far off. I am going to go in here to height. Kind of lower this. Now, the weird thing about these is that I actually don't want these to add together, but they will. So if I turn this back on, it looks stupid. So if I change this to replace, no. Normal, no. Getting here. Oh, because it's at a percent. Curses. Okay. This has to be at 100. And it still looks dumb. Oh, that's probably because of that. I can put them in a folder though. And lower the folder opacity. So that's not so bad now. Anyway, I did all of this because I want to go to this base color and I want to put a mask on this. A white mask. And I want to it's not quite what I want, but hang on. There we go. So I kind of want the bread to stick through, like the bread without the crust. I want to show through a little bit, like it's actually like the crust is falling off. That's my mad plan. But it's a little hard to see how my plan is supposed to work. It's also not working the way I want. So I don't want it happening up there. I want it down here. Curses. Let's try this one instead. Oh, there's no invert. There it is. Oh boy. I think this is edges scratched. That could be fun. So I ended up going with the edge scratched, and I lowered the curvature weight, increased the wear level and the contrast. That doesn't really do anything, does it? I played with the grunge amount. Oh. And so what does that give us? Oh, I have to invert it. Hang on. It gives us what looks like noise. Great. That was so what I wanted, guys. No, it wasn't. The problem really is with this bump map, which I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not loving. I'm just going to turn it off. Yeah. All right. One more thing. Let's add our paint. And if we don't like this, you don't have to do it. I am kind of actually still figuring this one out, to be honest. Where's that brush I like to use for this one? It's this. You know what? I'm just going to get rid of this procedural. Just in a couple of places, we'll scrape off, like the bread's coming off. So there we go. We've made the bread look horrible now. Actually, you know what? It's not too bad. I'm too hard on myself. Lower the opacity a bit. Just a little bit of extra detail. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But we had a little bit of extra time, so I thought you guys might like to see what you could do. Okay, so now it is time for break. 20 minutes. I will see you guys back at 3:10. Those of you who are in the lecture digitally, we have to UV the water bottle in the interior scene. The water bottle. The thermos? Yes, yes, you do. So those of you virtually, I'm going to leave this on and I'm going to pause the recording. And when we come back, we'll just pick that up.
Sir, we can't hear you on Zoom.
Thank you. This is way easier when you're teaching to one or the other. When you're doing both, it's very complicated. Okay, for those of you who were just muted, so we're adding a little bit of tarnish to the metal. Now, we do have a bit of a additional help to us because there is an exporter for Arnold. Go away, Siri. I don't even know how that happened. There is an exporter from Substance Painter straight to Arnold. And that is going to help us out because we're not going to have to figure out a lot of the complexities for how the textures work. We're just going to have to figure out how to plug them into Maya when we're done. So it's going to do most of the hard work for us. Now we did just make, so this is going to be our tarnish. It's pretty much the same except for color and a little bit of roughness. We still got normal in here, so I'm going to get rid of that. I do apologize for the virtual students who had like about 5 minutes of me talking with my mic turned off. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's add our black mask. And now we have a whole extra channel we're dealing with because we're dealing with metal. I'm going to add surface wear. I want this to be, you know what, this has got to be darker. It'll change the reflectivity a little bit, but I think the tarnish would do that anyway. All right, so that's a good one. Let's start off, let's add a fill. And I'm just going to add some grunge. What one do I want? Something nice and organic. Something like that. And then we'll make it light and max. I'm actually going to lower the opacity on this. There we go. I just wanted something to kind of break it up a little bit. That's pretty good. Don't forget, we got this little guy over here as well. Now, I'm also going to add some fingerprints. And there's a couple of ways to do this. I'm assuming this is something that's going to be cleaned pretty regularly. So the fingerprints that it's going to have are going to be pretty wipey. So there's a bunch of fingerprint grunges. Like, let's check this one out. Add a new fill. Keep it at like 2. And that one's not super useful, is it? We might have to adjust the balance. Nope, don't like it. Anyway, here are most of the fingerprint ones. Fingerprints dirty. Dust spread. Fingerprints dusty. Fingerprints dust spread. Fingerprints smeared. That's actually kind of what I'm looking for. Fingerprints smeared wide. Let's try that instead. I need to increase this for sure. Okay, now it looks pretty terrible as it is right now, but we're definitely going to be doing linear dodge add. And we're definitely going to be lowering the opacity on it. Bring it back to normal just so I can get a better look at it. Yeah, there we go. And now for fingerprints, we're going to add our paint. And we're pretty subtle for the most part, so I'm not going to paint anything out. However, oh. There is a fingerprints brush. So this is going to help us get our fingerprints exactly where we need them to be. Let's go ahead and make sure this stuff is turned up to where we need it. Okay. There would be a lot of fingerprints all over this, wouldn't there? I mean, that's where you put your fingers, right? As well as this. So I'd say we're getting a lot of mileage out of that tarnish layer, wouldn't you guys? Pretty big difference. We may not be able to clearly see and identify the fingerprints, but we do know that they're there and they are making a difference. A lot of this texture work is supposed to be subtle. So that's pretty good. So we've got our tarnish and our fingerprints. And now we're going to add some rust. We could go ahead and custom make our rust texture, but I do like one of the base materials they have. And you'll notice that while I am avoiding smart materials, I'm not avoiding the base materials. Because all these really are is they're just a texture repeating with a couple a couple of settings put in. So we'll go with the basic rust. And, change our color. I've got reference, but this is fine. Doesn't really do much. Anyway, That's our rust. Of course, we're going to add a black mask. Can add a smart mask. And there's a couple of some in here specifically made for rust. There's surface rust. I don't think our candle holder would be that rusty. I mean, we could tone it down, but I don't know. We probably won't use this one. You know what? That's kind of nice. Obviously, this is too much. We tone it down a little bit. Maybe. We'll consider it. There's rust ground. This is the most offensive one. This is something that has been sitting in the backyard in a junk pile. I think this is actually too clean for that. Rust drips. This one's kind of fun. This one again, junk pile, not usable. Nah. Edge rust. Cavity rust. This one actually could be good if we tone it back and really focus in on the cavity control, the curvature control. Whole space normal? No. Position gradient? No. Why are these even here?
Tricking someone shouldn't be possible.
Hello?
It will look more like this. But what if it removed the empty space in my atoms? The nucleus holds all 99%.
Hello? Someone is unmuted and we can all hear you.
In other words, if an atom was the size of a big apple, the nucleus would be just an apple.
Nelson, I had to mute you. Your TV was on. You'd be surprised. It's also possible he's in a room with like his sister or girlfriend or something. She's watching TV. Or brother, or boyfriend. I don't make judgments. Okay, so we are getting some rust out of this. You know, I think a little bit around the edge is not too bad. What really bothers me is this rust here. Probably going to cut back on that. And I like it in here. So that's pretty good. I may actually add this surface rust in too, because I kind of like that. Obviously, like it was way too much at the start. So it's just going to kind of tone it back so it's like a little bit of a splattering. And then, you know, we would go to combine the two. which if we look at our mask channel right now, we don't have a lot of rust. And that's good because this wouldn't have a lot of rust realistically if we were still using it. And we should make sure to check our little guy over here. Yeah, he's got a little rust, but he's fine. We could add a fill in, and I'm going to consider it, but realistically, a fill is probably going to give us way too much detail. But let's consider it. Could do something like this guy. That gives us some very specific details. We tone it back a little bit. Might not be the end of the world. Yeah, that's not terrible. And it's giving us some very location specific detail, which is good. You know, maybe we'll tone it down a little bit with the opacity. Not bad. And we look at the mask, we've still got a lot of the regular metal showing through. I am, however, definitely, nope. Stop doing things and add a paint. And as you guys can probably imagine, what I'm really going to use this for is I'm just going to grab my favorite dirt brush and minimum size. I'm going to take the stroke opacity down, and I'm going to use this to just kind of clear some of the rust out from some of the areas where I think it's a little bit too strong. So, And the good thing about when you do this hand painting is it is a nice randomized organic feel. So it looks less like it was generated by a computer than the fills and we got a seam here. The fills and the smart materials do, smart masks. Which is why I always try and do at least a little bit of hand painting because it can break up that sort of very computerized look. All right, hang on. What are we looking here? Where is this UV? This is what I wanted to paint out. A little bit too noticeable, too strong. Same here. That's it. Now, the interesting thing about this is if we go to our metallic channel, this is the first time we have anything in the metallic channel, and that's really going to change how our texture is driven when we get back into Maya. But I think we're going to leave that there unless you guys can think of any cool effects you want me to add onto this candle. What do you guys think? Yeah? All right. We'll leave it there. Okay. So there is one more thing that I want to address with you guys. Well, two things. And these are really just things that I want to show you guys so that you know you have this knowledge. I don't know if Adam stole this from me or not. Have you guys done stencils? Okay. Well, you do have to do a logo. And so Tony Saxon is going to show you how to do a projector in Maya. You have to do one of those, but I'm also going to show you how to just do a logo here in Painter. So let's just make a new layer and it will just make it like blue paint. So call it the logo. And I'll make it cyan colored. Black mask. And let's turn the cheese and the knife on just so I know where they're at. They are there. Okay. So we'll take this and I'm going to put my logo, my little corgi. You hold S, you can shrink it. And you can move it around. So middle mouse, right mouse, and whatnot. So you can put like a little brand on here, which I've never actually seen on a cutting board, but whatever, we're doing it for this project. I wish I didn't move my camera. Oh, we can't even see the paws because they're under the knife. Whatever. Whatever. Ugh. There we go. Feel like right here. All right. I know I put the stroke pass. A little bit of height, like it was painted on there. And lower the roughness a little bit. There we go. So that's one thing that's fun to show off. The other thing, I'm actually going to jump back to the candle for this. So let's add some candle wax. And we'll go with red candles. Those are orange. Those are, there we go. Slightly pinkish red. Wow, that is a big transition, isn't it? There we go. So here's our candle wax. Oh, we need to get rid of our stencil. And I'm going to save because this is a high probability of crashing, but it is fun. Eh. So have you guys gotten into, where are they? Particle brushes. I'm seeing a lot of no's. It's what?
It would be the same like on the other question.
No, because these are generated, you're doing a simulation. So for example, one I usually show off, this wouldn't work with our wax, but is fire. Quite a bit different, right? See? Now, the one I wanted to do was the candle wax strips, which will hopefully still work. So we do like a leak. Ah. Why is there so many spawners? Leaks heavy, liquid stream. Ah. Those look terrible. I hate them. Stroke opacity, size, jitter. There's so many settings for these. They're actually very complicated. Fade intensity. I want to lower the amount of particles being spawned. If I increase the spread. Nope, that's the opposite of what I wanted to happen. If I make the emitter bigger. Nope. Made all the particles bigger. That's not what I want. All I wanted was a couple of drops. Hey, that's better. I mean, it is kind of weird that they like that they're grouping together like that, but whatever. And let's put some over here on this guy. Ooh. Okay. There we go. That's kind of fun. And there's a bunch of these. You know, these aren't going to work for all for Candelax, but there's laser inputs. You really wanted to, let's say you were doing a spaceship and you had some stormtroopers shooting at you. You know, oh, fracture. Broken glass. So those are kind of fun. I think I'm going to leave the wax in there. All right, we are almost ready to export, guys. So, anything else I need to do? Oh, the cookie. This is really just because I like to show off substance source or substance share. So, you may have remembered I created or I brought in this cookie material. This is something I got off of Substance Share. It was created by another user. And You can go on there and you can find all sorts of materials made by other people. You can find materials made by one material made by me, and you can find stuff made by Substance. Some might be made by other students. Keep in mind though, you guys have had experience with, at this point in your life, with user created content. Some of it's really good. Some of it not so good, right? We've all played a Mario Maker level that is unplayable. And just like that, I've had some Substance textures that are unusable, mostly because they were made with previous versions of Substance that are no longer supported. But you can make these in Substance Designer or Substance Sampler. I think that's what they call it now. It used to be Alchemist. Adobe apparently did not approve of the name Alchemist for one of their softwares. So now it's Substance Sampler. And I thought Alchemist was a cool name. Anyway, this cookie material is pretty cool. I make a lot of jokes in my online classes about cookies. So one of my students was once like, you need to download this and use it in your class. And I was like, agreed. So obviously we can change the color of our cookie. We can change the color of our chocolate chips. So we wanted like more dark chocolate or more milky chocolate, do that. We could make them like Halloween themed chocolate chips or Christmas themed if we wanted to. What I really like is the crack intensity. So I can change how thick the cracks are. We can change our chocolate chip height. Chocolate chip offset. That's too much offset or too much change. So we get those big, thick chocolate chips. My UVs are kind of terrible, so we're getting a little bit of problem over here with the edge. Anyway, I think we're ready to export, don't you guys? Go back into Arnold, plug this bad boy in. Let's do it. By the way, any questions about anything you want to see in Painter before we leave? You guys are right. I can't believe that the icon says like PT. Is that what you said? PT. It should be SP.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because they call it, what is it? It's 3D Substance Adobe Painter. Just call it SP. Like, it's the abbreviations we've been using for it. Just call it SP, and Substance Designer is SD. And whatever, we can call Alchemist SS. Yeah, that one's not good. That one's not good. Because they changed it from Alchemist to Sampler. Which they probably did that because they didn't want it to be Adobe Alchemist, AA. But the new Adobe suite does look really good. If you guys have time, I would recommend looking up the GDC keynote. I went to that GDC keynote and they showed off all their stuff. They have a new thing called Substance Scene Stager. And literally you take your models and your substance textures and you put them in there and it's basically made to make renders. Yeah, it's rendering. The only thing you can't do in there is model or animate, but you can light, you can render. You can take your dome light and just click on it and be like, I need to take this into Photoshop and adjust it with one button. And then with one button, you can go back. I was like, that's really cool. trying to decide if I want to try to talk Tony into letting us teach it in this class. What? Well, I have to actually open it up and figure it out first. I have to learn it. Can we do leather texture in Substance Painter? Yen, I'm going to say if you have an object that you think that you have a reference that the leather texture will go with, but I don't want you to use the leather texture. I want you to create your own. Also think about wear and tear. If you're going to use Substance, don't just use the default Substance textures to put a texture on there, to bake it out, to bring it into Maya. Put some wear and tear on it. All right, let's export our textures. Okay, so is this where I want it to go? No, I don't think it is. Let's go to my lecture folder, to my lectures lecture folder. I really need to fix that. To my Maya project folder, and then my source images folder, and then the substance textures folder, and then 2021-08, create, open. And we want to grab the exporter for, where is it? It's probably up at the top, actually. For Arnold AI Standard Surface, we want to use Targa's and we're not going to export the knife or the cheese because we didn't actually texture those. Global settings. That should do it. That should be everything. Export 24 textures. All right, go. Woo. We did our bread. Our candle holder. Our cookie. Did I export all of these at, hang on. Save settings. I think I exported all of them at 1024, which I did not want to do. Because the cookie you're a 512er. Okay, bread, candle holder, cookie, cutting board. Okay, so only 4. So bread. That's our metalness map. I don't think we need that texture. Do you guys? It's black. So that's actually one thing. Everything that's not metal, we're going to get one of those black textures for our metalness. What is this? A roughness? Okay. Probably don't actually need that roughness map. So this one's useful. Yeah, our cookie metalness, not really useful. Cutting board, that's our metal. For those, we're just gonna leave the metal the way we have it in RenderMan. It's our bump, it's our height. Okay. Sorry, not RenderMan, Arnold. You guys will have to forgive me. I taught RenderMan for like 4 years. 3 years. And then I've been teaching Arnold for like 3 months. Still have a lot of vernacular stuck in my head. Okay. So we're back to our happy scene here. And we're going to start by working with these materials. Now, you guys already know how to plug textures in, so this is going to be very similar. The only difference is going to be a couple of settings once we import our maps. So let's start with our color. So we'll go to color, we'll go to file, we're going to import our map, substance texture. And this is the cutting board, right? I think so. I hope so. Otherwise, it's going to get really awkward. Okay, it is. And I think we can actually see all the detail we spent time making. We don't really have to change anything for color. Color is the easy one. Next, let's do our bump map. So for bump, we're going to go to geometry, bump map, click the checker box, go to file, and we're lucky it automatically assigns this for us. This is going to be our power control for our bump map. And I'm going to tell you off the bat, 1 is going to be a lot of bump. Let's tone that down to 0.1 to start with, and we may go lower. And then in bump value, you're going to click here. And here is where we're going to get our height map plugged in. Now, because the height map is black and white, you're going to want to change this from sRGB to raw. And you're going to want to go down here and you're going to want to uncheck or check alpha is luminance, which it automatically checked. So that's good. But make sure it's raw. And then let's go back to our material. Keep metalness off. We don't have a map for spec. So we're going to leave that where it is. And in roughness, we're going to plug in our roughness file. There we go. And again, you want to go raw. And that should just double check, but alpha's luminance should already be checked. It is not. So check it. Any black and white, you need to check that. Okay. So we've got a lot of time. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to render that as is. We're going to change our camera to the render cam. Oh, that's right. This is the night scene.
I was confused because I was wondering where to get the channel.
They're in the night scene. What? What? Pain? Oh, yeah, waiting for renders is painful. My advice to you guys, whenever you're rendering, have a book. You can just read.
How long do you, how long do you,
Depends on the job. A lot of, I mean, if you're CA, you're probably going to have access to a render farm when you're working in your careers. Yes, a render farm. Yes, it is basically a closet kept to like 20 degrees where it's filled with computers that do nothing but render. It may actually only be like 4 computers, depending on how nice your studio is. They have to pay for all those, obviously. But it's a bunch of computers. Their only job is to render. So when you're like, cool, I have to render this shot, this animation shot, it's 5 seconds. So that's 30 frames a second. So that's math. It's like 150 frames, let's say. You know, on your computer, that would take a day. But what it does is it takes each one of those frames and it splits it between the computers. So let's say you have 4 computers. This computer is like, I'll take frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, and they render it. And they are doing nothing else. They don't have Maya on. They don't have YouTube on or anything. They don't have Outlook open or Discord or anything. All they are doing is rendering until they're done, and then they go to the next frame. It's really nice. Okay, we definitely have too much value in that bump map, so I'm gonna bring it lower. I'm actually gonna move my camera in a bit because this camera is like really far out. And I want to see all that beautiful rendering, all that beautiful work we did. Maya, why? Maya just went bye-bye.
That's what happens to me all the time. I work with the computer.
I'm just mad I didn't save. Now I have to rehook that material up. That's not even a proper crash. That's just Maya going, nope.
Ciao.
So the irritating part is we do all of the work in this class, and then it like takes an hour for me to just show the renders of the materials. It's always that way. It's like with texturing, like I do all the hard work and I'm like, I've got like 40 minutes left. Get so much time. And then it's just eaten up by like crashes and stuff. One day they will allow us to teach this class with a PC, and it will be much heavier, but it will render without crashing. What I look forward to. No, we never had PCs. Yeah, those are the recording arts classrooms. They don't let us in there. They have some like complicated audio equipment. Anyway, oh wait, we got the TX files. Yay. That gets people all the time when I do that. I don't even really think it's that funny, but it just kind of like helps. I only do it when I'm frustrated because it relieves frustration. Okay, let's go ahead and plug our bump map in. Geometry, Bump mapping, file. I love that thunder. I'm gonna have to drive home in that. 0.05. Uh, raw. Okay. And now we save because I've learned my lesson. Now we render. Not the render cam. I actually want to render from my perspective. It is weird with that glossy loaf of bread next to it.
I feel like it's got that.
If it does, I just saved. We will lose 10 seconds. What's with all these dots here? Were these in our texture? Is that our bump map? One way to find out. Hey. Have to use the hypershade. Should be using the hypershade anyway. Cutting board. Make this 0. Yeah, that's weird. It looks like our water stains had bump on them for some reason. I don't know. Yep, they definitely do. That is incorrect. Oh well. It's a shame. I actually really like that texture. Unless, did we? No, it is height. Hang on. No, there shouldn't be any. I don't know, guys. Just look weird. Okay. So that's our cutting board. Let's go ahead and apply the rest of our textures. So color. Red. We didn't really do roughness for the bread, so I'm gonna leave that at like 0.4 and not bother with the texture. But I am gonna plug in the bump map. And I'm worried, guys. I'm worried this is gonna look terrible. All right. Let's go ahead and we'll do the cookie. Sadly, you guys don't even have a cookie. I made that especially for the demo. funny. If you look at the chips and the texture, you're like, for the cookie, where is it? It's like, oh, those look like regularly sized chips. And then they get smushed on the edges. All right. So this is the metal one. And just like all the other ones, we want this to be raw. Alpha is luminance. And then roughness. And the only thing left is the bump map. By the way, notice our candle holder looks black where the metal is showing up. That is normal. It should not look that way when we actually render. Okay. Let's render. Wait. Hang on. Stop. Save. Okay, now we can render. It is done. It is noisy, but it is done. It looks pretty good. Let's check it from our render camera now. See if we can still see all that detail. I should have saved that last shot. Damn. Is that our render camera? That doesn't look right. There we go. All right, guys. That's it. We did a little early. Normally, when I end early, I show off stuff, but everything changed. Or I'm not doing that because anything I show you is probably going to be relevant when I open up substance sample. I've already figured out enough to know that most of the stuff I'm going to show you guys stays about. I do recommend checking out the sample. It's really cool. There is actually an auto tiler. So you know how you guys had to do that Photoshop thing where you offset it, you painted out the seams? It'll do that for you almost automatically. It still has a little bit of trouble figuring out like details. And so you can basically go in and you basically, instead of like trying to clone stamp it, it automatically tiles it and like tries to blend it together. And you'll get like weird blurry patches, but then you literally just go like, don't paint the seam here. And it'll be like, okay. And it'll automatically look, it'll be like for another detail and be like, do you want the seam here then instead? And if you don't, just go, nope, not here. It'll be like, okay, I guess here then.
You did like a whole demo on Photoshop.
Yes. And Substance has made that obsolete. So it's way easier in Office or sampling. Believe me, for about 15 years, I've done the whole Photoshop thing where you offset it. Bone stamp. It's useful to know because the clone stamp tool is a useful tool. That's the problem we always run into is like, should we stop showing them this so that we can show them better tools? It's like, but they should still know about Photoshop because you should still know about Photoshop, guys. It's always true. You should still know how Photoshop works because at some point you're going to find something that you just need Photoshop to do. And doesn't matter if you're a modeler or a texture artist or a lighting artist, even an animator, it's kind of just expected everybody knows Photoshop. And so if your boss is like, hey, I need you to just change that, just go into Photoshop and just like clone stamp it out, and you're like, but I don't know how Photoshop works. They're gonna be like, how did you get hired here? So that is the problem we run into. Like, you should still know that stuff. but nobody else teaches it to you.
Not in high school.
What?
Not in high school.
I mean, here at Full Sail, that we're like, nobody teaches you Photoshop really, except for us, as far as I know. Does anybody else teach you Photoshop? Does anybody else at Full Sail teach you Photoshop? Yeah, that's a problem.
They just did, okay, go in Photoshop. And it's like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, like there was another course that taught Photoshop. I think it was, yeah, I know someone who said that.
Oh, they do it in the art classes?
Yeah, you can use Photoshop if you want to, but
You use what?
I use my own.
Is it GIMP? Is it Procreate? Okay.
And, you know, I use multiple ones.
Oh, there's good ones. I don't have an iPad, so I can use Procreate, but I can use ArtFlow, which is the Android equivalent,
Yes.
It's not as good.
I used to use that on my phone.
but I don't have to sell my soul to Apple to use it.
Autodesk Sketchbook isn't bad either.
Autodesk Sketchbook.
Sketchbook isn't bad.
So there's some good ones out there. All right, guys. How about you in my online class? You guys, do you have any questions? You still there? Online?
I'm all good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. So why don't we do this? I will end the recording and we can take roll. And I'll let you guys out of here like what, 30 minutes early? I mean, you're gonna have to be in lab for a little bit more, but you'll be fine. Okay. Yeah, I'll figure out the comeback time.